All right, you have made it to the fun part of the course. Because up until now, we've talked about all the brushes and settings and features and checkboxes and all the functionality of sculpt mode. But the only point in knowing any of that, or it even existing, is for us to sculpt cool things. And that's what we're going to do starting in this lesson. We are going to sculpt a stylized shark based on artwork from Alyssa Vasey. We used this in the previous version of this course and it was a big hit. And I think this is perfect reference for a first sculpting project. I am going to focus on this bottom right shark as the main shark. That's the one that I'm trying to recreate in 3D. But the benefit of having all these other sharks is that it provides additional information. So when we sculpt our shark from the front, we have reference to fill in that gap because we don't get that information if we have just this single shark. So from the front 3/4, we have this hammerhead, and it doesn't matter that it's a different type of shark. It still informs us of body silhouette, as well as the top view, which shows us generally the width of the body versus the tail. And also the style of this artwork is just amazing for interpreting into 3D. So big thanks to Alyssa for letting us use your art again. You can follow Alyssa on Instagram at VaseyArt or on Twitter at Alyssa Vasey. Now let's get into Blender and get to work. First thing I'm going to do is bring in our artwork. I'm going to drag up a new small window and switch it to the image editor, and then click the open button and navigate to our ref folder, Shark Art Alyssa Vasey, and this is provided with the source files, which you can download on the course landing page. And this shark right here is what I'm interested in. Now to get started, remember I recommend avoid starting from a default cube. In the event that I switch to dynamic topology, which I do plan to do, so I'm going to just delete it. Let's delete everything actually, and then add a mesh icosphere. And I'll jump up the subdivisions to 5. That should be smooth enough. And then we need to decide the orientation of our sculpture. I like to take advantage of symmetry whenever I can, and the default is X symmetry, so that would mean our shark head needs to be pointed in the negative Y-axis, and the shark tail points in the positive Y-axis. Now, for me personally, I don't like my objects either being modeled or sculpted in the middle of the grid floor. There's just something that visually bothers me about it being bisected by this grid. So I like to tab into edit mode, hit GZ, and move everything up so that it'll appear to be floating on top of the floor. And then tab back to object mode. We can jump either into sculpt mode from here or try the sculpting workspace. And actually, I won't do this because we lost our artwork. And rather than pull it up again, might as well stick with the layout. We can get rid of the timeline at the bottom and simply jump into sculpt mode. Pull out the width so we can see the names of our brushes, and we are ready to start sculpting. Let's enable X symmetry before I forget. And then also, preferentially, I like a matte cap. And the first matte cap, second matte cap, either of those are pretty good in my opinion. Now, which to start with, either the grab or the snake hook. I think I'll start with the snake hook because there's sort of this S-curve going on with the body, and that's going to be better for the snake hook rather than the linear fall off of the grab brush. So snake hook, I'm going to use a big brush, and let's try pulling it out here. You see how that hooks? That's going to be great for the snout, but I don't think I like how that worked out. Let's try it one more time. There we go. And then the stroke doesn't have to be perfect. We'll come in afterwards and kind of manipulate the silhouette. The fall off, I want to change to that custom for the grab brush. You've seen me do this a few times. It just feels so much better for some reason. Now, when we're starting out, you want to use big brushes, right? If I'm changing the silhouette and the brush is really small, it's going to create this lumpiness because I have to make a bunch of strokes over and over. And lumpiness is a very common issue, especially beginning your sculpting journey. So make your brush big in the early stages. That will keep our changes broad and keep the surface as smooth as possible. Back to the snake hook, we've kind of got the body teardrop shape established, at least started. So now we'll pull out the rear of the shark and then come in and smooth it, or rather shrink and taper with the grab brush. Now let's zoom out, kind of one eye on the left viewport, one eye on the artwork. And I think I need to bring all of this kind of down and out towards the front. The belly needs to come down as well. And I don't mean to discount the artistic eye. That's actually a huge, important part of this process, which only gets developed with time. But it is this sort of dance, looking left, looking right, look at my sculpture, look at the artwork, and then you kind of develop this vision for how close you are, being able to transpose the 2D to 3D. And this is looking pretty good for now for a starting point, certainly. And so with this basic shape kind of established, let's do a remesh operation. So let's open the settings. I'm going to enable fixed poles. Let's make the voxel size 0.05 and remesh. Now that's going to make our geometry consistent, and that's important to me as we begin the sculpture. We want to get started on the right foot. Now, I've spent most of my time looking at the side view, and I've neglected the front view. So once we look there, if this doesn't strike you as odd, it's probably just because I've sculpted this shark several times before. But we can get some information from this other shark, the hammerhead, where it's actually broader at the bottom, and it kind of tapers towards the top. Yet another teardrop shape. And we've got it inverted at the moment. So I'm going to take my grab brush and kind of pull it out on the front bottom. Again, big brush radius, and then pull it to a taper at the front. I'm sorry, at the top. All right, so from the front view, we kind of have this teardrop shape. And then from the side, it should still look the same, but we are set up much better proportionally. Excellent. All right, now to smooth out the remesh, something I like to do is jump over to our mesh filter brush down here. And we'll change the filter type to be relax. Now, I can try either relax or smooth. The problem with smooth is that it tends to shrink the silhouette a little bit. So I will avoid that for now, and the relax should hopefully relax the topology, but keep the shape. So I'm gonna click and drag a couple times, just trying to ensure that we have a smooth shape. Because from experience, I've seen students that lose track of a smooth sculpture and end up with a lumpy one. So I'm trying to help with that. Hold Shift to smooth out. Let's see, doesn't seem to be doing much. Let's choose the smooth brush. Okay, the strength should be fine. There we go. Holding Shift, just keeping a broad eye on how smooth our shape is. I think the tail needs to come in, because if we look at the top, it gets really, really skinny towards the back. So let's pull that in, kind of smash it towards the horizon of symmetry. Always minding the silhouette, wanting to keep it as smooth as possible. But I think we're good for now. Let's pull out some fins. I'm going to start with the top here, zoom out to see the whole shark so I get an idea of the size of this fin. And I'm going to use the mask brush. And also, I should have mentioned, you might have been hearing the mouse click this whole time. That's because I was not using the pin, and that was intentional. When it comes to the grab brush and snake hook brush, there's more of a precision with the mouse, because with the pin, you can get subtle movements when you pull the pin away from the surface that can mess up grab movements especially. And so I've been using the mouse up until this point, but now I'm kind of switching gears and grabbing the pin. And so I'm going to hit M for the mask brush, and we're going to find, let's see, I must already hit M. And we're going to find the center and mask out a little fin. Now I'm keeping one eye on the left, one eye on the artwork, and that appears to be maybe a little bit too big. So hold Control and paint out some of that mask, Control I to invert, and then we'll use the snake hook brush to pull out our fin. And then let's remesh with Control R. So we get nice topology. The mask doesn't seem to be preserved too much, but it's supposed to be preserved anyway. It doesn't matter. Hold Control and let's, we'll go to the mask brush, then hold Control and paint out all the mask on the fin. We'll leave it on the body, and then back to the grab brush with G. And now that I have the kind of size, maybe it's a little bit too big actually. Yeah, so let's use the scale brush. Or it's not really a brush, I guess it's just a operator. Anyway, let's go to the mask, or is it sculpt? Yeah, set pivot to the mask border. And now we can scale this down a bit. Hit undo, redo. Yeah, I think that feels a little bit better. Still, probably needs to scale down a touch. There we go. All right, back to the grab brush. Kind of modify the silhouette. It comes to more of a point at the top. See how thick it is. I need to thin it out a bit. Maybe use the pinch brush. It can be difficult when you have a horizon of symmetry because the brush is sort of fighting against itself each side of the stroke. And so let's use the pinch brush. Just kind of pinch it down the middle. Smooth it out. Let's see, Alt-M to clear the mask. I need to fix some of that. Because in the artwork, it comes to a nice point where the fin connects to the body, and I've sort of lost that with the scaling operation. So maybe we pinch around to make that a little bit tighter. There we go. It's feeling better. Trusty grab brush to pull out the silhouette. There we go. That is a pretty good start for the first dorsal fin. All right, now let's move on to the pectoral fin. So we'll use the same approach, M for the mask brush, and we need to pick a good spot, which can be tricky to do. So I'm going to eyeball that and then look at the front, or the hammerhead view from the front. And that's probably a little bit too low. So Alt-M to clear and then find a new spot, just a little bit higher. I think that's going to work out a little better. Excellent. Maybe hold control with the mask brush and kind of taper off the ends here so they're a little bit sharper. Control I to invert. And snake hook brush, where are you? All right, let's pull these fins out. There we go. Control R to remesh. Mask brush, paint out anything masked on the fin itself. Just repeating the workflow from the dorsal fin. Now, I made these point a little bit too far down. I think they need to rotate a little bit out. So same situation, sculpt menu and then set pivot to the masked border. This time we'll use the rotation tool. It picked that one on the left side. That should be fine. There we go. Maybe these do point a little more down. Whoops, undoing, remove the pivot operation. So masked border, and I just want to rotate a little less. There we go, something like that. Alt-M to clear the mask. All right, so let's make this match the shape with our trusty grab brush. I might need to increase the remesh density, which means to decrease the voxel size. Like, let's try 0.03. Let's remesh again, Control R. Yeah, that's going to give me a little more geometry to work with. And then smoothing a tip like this can help it make it sharp, but we'll come back and polish it exactly. We're just trying to block out the main shapes, get the proportions under control in this video. And I like how we're doing that so far. All right, let's move toward the tail and pull out, I believe it's referred to as the caudal fin. All right, same sort of thing. You've seen this process before. We're going to mask it out, top and bottom. Control I to invert and snake hook brush. Pull out the bottom first. Maybe I should not mask out the top. Yeah, that's probably a poor choice. So paint out the top and just pull out the bottom. And then remesh, Control R, Alt M. Mask off the top. Control I to invert, snake hook brush. And the bottom one is not as large as the top one. There we go. Control R to remesh. And then let's paint out. I just clear the mask with Alt M. All right, let's see how that looks zoomed out. Proportionally, I made this whole thing a little too big. We could use the scale tool, or I can just use the grab to kind of shrink it down. Totally a preference thing. I think the transform operators down here are a little bit cumbersome. I don't use them as much as I just lean on the grab brush. So you saw me just do it with grab. So this bottom one kind of has more of a hook to it. but the top one has a nice smooth shape to it. And that's pretty good in terms of thickness. Maybe thin it out a little bit, top and bottom. All right. I think we're pretty good for, an initial block out of the body. I'm just going to zoom out and kind of get a feel for it. It does feel like the artwork, it's a little bit longer of a body. So maybe I will use the scale and just, kind of scale in the y-axis. Yeah, I think that feels a little bit better. Control Z to undo, Shift Control Z to redo. And then, yeah, okay. I've lost some of my S curve down here at the bottom. So broad stroke. It's also not nearly as skinny toward the caudal fin. So maybe I do need to kind of shrink this whole caudal fin. So I'm going to hit B to box select and then hit our A pie menu, smooth the mask, Shift R a couple times, Control I to invert, sculpt, set pivot to masked border. And once again, we'll do the scale. I'm going to select the white circle so it scales everything. There we go. Control Z, Shift Control Z. I think that's better. Back to the grab brush, just trying to make this skinnier. Let's see, Alt M to clear the mask. I turned off overlays so I couldn't see it. Alt M to clear the mask. There we go. And this thing is super skinny. That's part of the appeal of this sculpture is that, or rather the artwork, I mean, is the extremity of how small this area is versus how big the body is. That makes it for a very appealing shape. And that's, what the nature of stylized art does. And so it's very, very fun to sculpt. I think that's going to be it for stage 1 of our shark sculpture. Let's make sure to save it before Blender crashes and we lose all this glorious work. Shift Control S to save. And this is video 14 for me. And it is the end of the lesson. Make sure you always save. We'll continue sculpting our shark in the next video.